Hi everyone, this is Referral, founder and CEO of Zendoc Labs. Today we are going to go through the so-called AARRR framework, or R framework, the sound that a pirate would make. This is a powerful tool for any sales and marketing professionals as you either go to market, set up your go-to-market strategy for your new brand, product, or startup, or if you're experiencing new or recurring issues in your pipeline and are trying to fix those. That's where the pirate framework, as I will call it going forward, because it's easier to say, comes in handy. Before we dive into the explanation here and some context in terms of what my experience is with it and just give you a couple of case studies, let me tell you a little bit more about myself so that you know who you're listening to. As mentioned, founder and CEO of Zendoc Labs, we help businesses grow faster. Before starting Zendoc Labs, was a principal at Roivant, a principal investor out of New York. We raised $3 billion from SoftBank, Founders Fund, and a bunch of other strategic and financial investors for our own balance sheet, and then deployed that into a portfolio of startups. I think 3 or 4 of our ventures also went public on the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange, and then I parted ways in the beginning of 22, which is also when I started Zendoc Labs. Before around 2017, which is when I joined Roivant, I started 2 successful startups myself. One in digital health, the other one was an e-commerce business. So this is new for me, and having worked with dozens of startups in the recent past, I should be able to add some interesting color here. So let's look into the R framework, the pirate framework. It essentially has 5 phases or 5 steps, whatever you want to call them: acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, and referral. And each of these stages is essentially one stage in the buyer decision-making journey in some sense, or just the journey of customers as they become your customers and stay your customers and invite others to join. This is, first of all, useful in order to design your go-to-market strategy if you haven't designed one yet. So, if you are a startup that has raised venture capital and accelerating growth, then you will need a strategy to acquire customers or consumers, depending on whether you're a B2B or a B2C company. You will need to activate them somehow, which means how can you get, for instance, users to engage with your application, to start exploring the different features, spending time in it. And retention is about keeping these users that you have acquired. Revenue is turning them into paying customers, and referral is to have them turn into evangelists. All right, so that's where it comes in handy. Across all of these stages, you will have different go-to-market strategies that you can apply. In acquisition, for instance, you could be using something like paid social, or you could do cold outreach. You could do in B2B, you could do trade shows, all kinds of things that you could do here. So that's where the first use case, I would say, of this framework comes in, is just to design your go-to-market strategy. But where I think this is really, really useful is in the second point that I have on the right here, which is around finding and removing friction in your pipeline. Every pipeline, even if you are the most mature business out there, will have friction somewhere in the process from bringing a customer into your pipeline and turning them into evangelists. In 9 out of 10 cases, you will have friction somewhere. And so what the framework gives you is a mental model of 5 phases where leads could get stuck. So let's run through a couple of these examples. I'll start with the first one, and that will be myself. A couple of months ago, I was experimenting with a new thesis of productized services, specifically in the pitch deck creation space. It was very easy for me to run. I know how to do this, right? So it was very easy for me to set up ads on Meta, Instagram, Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Reddit, on Google Search, on other places. What I ultimately experienced in the acquisition phase is that while I was bringing in leads, I had a very high number of no-shows. And that was, for me, something that was going wrong in the acquisition phase. And I was able to plug that into there. At the same time, I knew once I solved, almost like a chessboard, right? Once I solved this immediate issue that I had, I will likely run into activation-related issues. And so in this case, this case study, so to say, or this example, I had problems around acquisition, and the way I fixed those was by streamlining the quote-unquote onboarding process, i.e. by removing steps between when a lead signs up and them booking a meeting with me. I created instant forms in the ads. I had my Calendly linked right at the end. And instead of having, sending out the Calendly to qualified leads, I would rather have them book meetings, even if they're unqualified, and cancel meetings, just because that was more efficient for the ones that actually mattered to me. So that's the acquisition stage. In activation, it's about how can you, as I said, how can you get a user that you've already in some sense acquired, depending on the specific context of your business, to engage more with your product, where engagement with your product or service usually results into higher retention and monetization. For example, a very prominent example here is Apollo. What they will do in order to have you start engaging with Apollo is like a tool like Zoom Info, for instance, where you can find information on leads, including their email, their social profiles, their phone numbers, and also set up automated email campaigns. Apollo will start to reward you for behaviors that demonstrate engagement with the application. For instance, you will get free credits if you connect your email. You will get free credits if you connect your CRM. And so this in-app tutorial mingled with things you have to do is a great way of teaching you how to use the product. And once you understand how to use the product, you will get its value, and that gets you activated in some sense. From there, it goes into retention, right? Once you have managed to get people to engage with your product after you brought them in, and it literally, like, I'm not saying this out of fun, that it's in this sequence, literally, usually you go through in this sequence, right? You first figure out how to acquire them, then you figure out how to activate them. And usually that's going to take some time. And ultimately you get into retention, and you will see frustrating data on, hey, my churn rate is too high, my customer lifetime value is too low relative to my customer acquisition cost. All of this stuff matters on the margin side of the business. It matters to potential investors if you're a startup looking to raise capital. And so retention is usually the next thing that goes sour, especially if you are in DTC. Retention is the major problem for DTC and small ticket B2B. If you are an enterprise business that's selling complicated technology like SAP, for instance, or core operating technology for banks to run their account management on, you're not going to get replaced easily because it's so hard the switching costs are so high. But for most DTC businesses, direct to consumer businesses, it's a fight for attention, and at some point you're going to lose that. And so retention becomes very important. And what you can do, obviously, there are various things you can do about that, and it's a whole philosophy. But ideally, you at least start with data management and data tracking, right? You want to understand what your net promoter score is. Send your users some kind of happiness survey. You want to track what your retention and churn rates are. You want to find your power users and identify what their use cases are and what they get most value out of the business and the product, and then highlight those and find more people like that. You want to, for instance, also create a community. You could have in the beginning something as simple as a Telegram or WhatsApp or Discord chat. There are obviously trade-offs between these systems, but it's great to keep people engaged. Later on, it could be through a Slack channel that's a little larger, or through a community that you combine with a podcast or something like that. You'll have to put serious dollars against retention just because it's such a hard problem to crack. Ultimately, customer success, for instance, plugs also into retention, right? If you're not reselling, upselling, cross-selling your deals, someone else will get into the account and you will lose that account. So that's retention. As far as revenue is concerned, once you acquired someone, you get them to engage with your product, you're keeping them on it, then it starts to become time to convert them into paying customers. That's where product-led growth comes in very handy, right? All the product-led growth companies will give you a free trial with an in-app tutorial to explain it to you, maybe with a video, maybe even with an offer to talk to a customer service or sales rep. And ultimately, they try to nudge you into revenue, into monetization via, for instance, limitations around the length of the free trial, around the usage of the free trial, or just by saying, hey, if you want to talk another 30 minutes to me, for instance, you will have to start paying money. And then ultimately from there you go into referral, and referral is the holy grail where you then go into organic growth, potentially even into viral growth if the viral coefficient is high enough. And there are businesses that by default are set up for a referral or viral growth, and there are businesses that have to figure out how to do it. What is by default a little bit like that is anything relating to collaboration. If you're a collaboration tool, you have virality built into your product. So you could be a Loom, for instance, which is being shared across teams and across companies. That is perfect for viral growth. It could be Slack. It could be Calendly. Right? These are products that are anything relating to collaboration is just inherently has a higher virality, and it's a great place to be. If you're not that type of business, you need to think about a customer loyalty program, especially if you're a services-based business, and other ideas that you can come up with for people to become referrers to your business. It could be an affiliate marketing system that you are introducing, stuff like that. All right, so that's around finding and removing friction in your pipeline. And most fundamentally, what you should do across all of these 5 phases is find some data points that are relevant for your specific context and track how you're performing it. On average, what will happen is that you get leads into the pipeline here, and then somewhere you start seeing friction. Usually it starts at the very beginning, and then you work your way through to making one work after the other until you got like a funnel that works. And I have a separate video on a funnel that I created where you see what tools and steps I took in order to sort of remove the friction that I was experiencing in my own pipeline. All right. Let me know if you find this stuff useful. If you do like the video, leave comments below if you have questions. Do subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this type of content and want to stay in the loop. And any other way, you can always find me on my socials or via email if you want to follow up. All right, thank you for your attention and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.